Yep.
Perfect.
Just say it's the time.
So, 6:30, 6:29, calling meeting order.
Do the roll call.
Roll call.
Don Bagley,
Here.
Chris Cox,
Here.
Brian Maynard,
Here.
Landon Mackley,
Yep.
Susan Alshire,
Here.
David Wilkins,
Present.
Lynn Burns,
Here.
Phil Hoffman, Dale Hughes,
And then, a forum, we do have a forum, so official business can take place, and then so you just lay down and pledge allegiance.
All right. And then we're going to pledge allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Jeff, just open the floor for comments from citizens, and then step forward to the microphone, state their name and address for the record.
So, floor is open for comments from citizens. Will you step forward? Please state your name and address for the record.
I'm not entirely sure if this is the procedural place, either as may arise or comments from citizens, so I'll go ahead. My name is Mike Campbell, and I'm here with my mother, Betty Gooding, and council, and zoning staff, Mr. Mayor. What I'm wanting to comment on this evening is in relation to a hearing which was canceled on Thursday evening, and just asking for some clarification, if that's okay, on why Ms. Gooding, my mom, can't get a conditional use permit from using a Airbnb and a piece of real estate that she's seeking to purchase for that purpose. And so, I don't know if this, can I inquire of that, or am I just allowed to make comment?
Yeah, the advice from our legal counsel, after a review, was that it did not meet the qualifications, because our code is very specific on the definition of what would be allowed for a bed and breakfast. And we don't actually specifically talk about Airbnb or short-term rentals. However, it's her opinion also that those are not allowed. But if the commission, so the commission would be violating the city code, and then it would make everything prior to this decision invalid if we allowed it. But they could look at updating the current ordinances and the current regulations for the bed and breakfast. So that way we could go ahead with the conditional use hearing and for the conditional permit.
So,
Conditional use permit.
I mean, I guess that the only thing is because it's a time-sensitive process. I mean, even assuming that the definition 9 under R1 permitted uses applies, which I'm not entirely sure that it does. Even assuming it does, my understanding is that conditional use requests are in place so that if a specific dwelling or structure type doesn't fall within one of the definitions, you can seek a conditional use permit. So, because they're saying that it is both within 9 but doesn't meet the qualifications of 9, I guess why wouldn't we still be permitted to either seek a conditional use or ask for a variance?
The conditional use is very it's very specific, the language for for how you can obtain a conditional use permit. I'm trying to find exactly how she said it, so I can look just a second. So the city code specifically defines a conditional use and what has to occur or be present for the board to consider that conditional use. And then it must be strictly enforced, or else the action will be considered void from the beginning and unenforceable.
Okay.
And then she said she does not think the board has the ability to take action on either request for Airbnb or Airbnb at this time. She said unless the Airbnb would qualify as a conditional use under some other definitions definition, but I talked to her about that, and she said later on after further review, Airbnb also would not qualify.
I mean, I guess it's a little unfair because I'm asking you to be a go-between Ms. Mayfield, who I assume is a city attorney, and myself, and I did try to reach everybody separately. I guess our position would be that number 9 isn't what applies to what we're asking for. It speaks to guest house facilities.
This is actually, let me show you this. And this is in the chapter as well. And I have 2 copies, so you're looking for that one. That's where she's getting the information. It says bed and breakfast facility containing not more than 9 guest sleeping rooms, which provides sleeping rooms and meals for transient guests occupying rooms for no more than 14 consecutive days for compensation, and which further provides for compensation rooms for businesses or non-business meetings and similar functions, rooms for wedding receptions, and rooms for dances, all provided that such bed and breakfast facility is located on a lot having at least 3 acres of lot area. So that's actually the section that we would be looking to change.
Okay, and that's 3119.6, is that right?
Yes.
I'm reading at the top.
Mhm.
'Cause
And it is wrong in the online version of the code.
Okay, that's, because that's what I have right here, is
Yeah.
3121 and 3122.
That's how we found this, is because that is wrong.
Aha, okay, well, that actually puts things a little bit more into perspective. So there's no conditional use, so according to Ms. Mayfield, there's no conditional use permit for this situation. Is there some sort of an appeal mechanism, such as an adjustment or variance, that would exist in, you know, if a developer puts the house too close to the sidewalk or something?
There is an appeal to the Board of Adjustment. They
Okay.
made an application to the Board of Adjustment for that type of a situation.
Because I don't know what the time frame is for updating ordinances.
So I did give the board, this commission information.
We've got some stuff here I think we were gonna discuss.
Right, we're gonna discuss under
In
as may
relationship to
arise.
this.
Okay,
So if they come up with, something that they think would be reasonable,
yeah,
then we have to give 15-day notice to have a public hearing.
sure.
And then it could go before the Board of Aldermen
Okay.
after that,
Okay.
depending on what the commission decides.
So what I'll say in support of it is that there was a need study performed. I think Ms. Lloyd Myers was in charge or part of that, and we determined that City of Centralia does have a need for these types of establishments. And I think most of you probably know my mom and know that she's gonna run a reputable establishment in town and hold itself to the highest standards.
I travel a lot, I stay up.
Yeah.
So I mean, it's a thing of the world. I mean, if you
Right,
travel,
it
you
is.
stay at one of them again. So bottom line is, we talked earlier, just so you know, I mean,
Yeah.
we weren't talking on behalf of the folks here in planning and zoning, but what makes sense for us to be able to have availability of out of Centralia, out in the real world opportunities. So we talked about, that's why this is in the Herman one, I think especially,
Yeah,
did some things. So they looked at some other places that were very specific,
yes.
and then they looked, how could they alter that where it would fit, where moving forward would be a problem.
And I know that like the city of Jefferson they have a permit process where they have to actually approve the person purchasing, and then they actually have to apply and pay the city a permit fee. I think it's $30, but, you know, it's money in the till for the city, and then also the city gets to determine whether or not the person should actually be approved to run the establishment. So that, to ensure the highest standards are met of the community.
Right.
The city of Blackjet actually has something similar. No, wait, the city of Herman has residency requirements that you have to live in the bed and breakfast. Blackjack does not, so that's something that we would want to address as well. So I don't know if you guys have thoughts on that. But we're definitely going to discuss this during the as may arise section.
So and I'll leave some of those comments to the boss. But ultimately, I think that with the VRBO and Airbnb type structure, it's different from, say, a bed and breakfast. Bed and breakfast, there's usually owner occupants, so the owners are downstairs or upstairs or what have you. Airbnb, VRBO, a little bit different. And so, you know, if there's some way to tease that out between the two, that's what I would propose, but I'm just a guy up here talking, so.
No,
yeah.
I think you make good points on it. I think it's something we're gonna discuss real quick.
Yeah, and I mean, my recommendation would be to have some sort of permanent process where someone has to actually come and establish that, hey, look, I'm gonna be able, like I said, keep up with the standards that the community, city of Centralia expect. Thank you very much, council, members of the committee.
Any more comments or questions from the?
Hi, I'm Betty Gooding. I'm the one that's requesting the purchase of a house here in Centralia for the VRBO Airbnb. This is not something I just decided on a whim. This has been a dream I've had for several years. I'm in a position now at my age that I feel like I'm ready to invest in the city of Centralia. This, I think, is a win-win, not just for myself, but also for the city of Centralia. It's for sure needs. I know that there was a feasibility study done to show that there was a need. My goal is not only to be able to provide a beautiful home for people to stay in here in Centralia, but also to generate revenue for Centralia. We have some wonderful shops, we have places to eat, we have grocery stores where they'll be able to buy groceries. So this is for me a win-win for the city of Centralia as well as for myself. I'm the one who's sticking my neck out and making the risk and the investment for the benefit, to benefit Centralia, my home, that I love, and I feel like I've invested, my husband and I have invested in several houses, and we weed out people that we know want to live in these homes that will take care of them like their own. This will not be any different. It's going to be run differently, obviously, but it's something that I take great pride in hoping to be able to do for the city of Centralia. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any additional comments?
I did receive a call from Dale Hughes, who's not here. He's on the commission, and he is in favor of moving forward with something that would allow this type of establishment.
So the next thing on the agenda is to review and approval of meeting minutes. August 8th. Is that correct? All right, so you're gonna have to walk me through this. I'm just
That's
gonna
fine.
sorry, I'm new to this.
There's a memo there, and it kind of has what the motion would be for this section too. So you would, somebody would make a motion to approve the minutes, I would second it, and then just ask for
So, there's-
somebody.
I make
we
a
have
motion to approve the minutes.
All right,
Approved.
all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right. Brings us to number 5, right? So zero lot lines.
So we had some discussion about this back and forth via email. There's some drafts that went out for this ordinance, and I thought Lynn drafted a very good copy of the ordinance, and then Brian came up with some other comments. Did you all have a chance to see those?
Yes.
Lloyd, did you have a chance to see those as well?
Yes, reserving the right to comment.
So did the, this is up for discussion.
it was a good ordinance.
It seemed to address everything that we had talked about. And then, and everybody was okay with the additional things that Brian added. Just a couple of different things, section, it was on page 4, for the plan, dwelling district design layout, he added A and B. And that was to Lynn's version.
Yeah, those two are ones that Lynn had added to the original one you sent out. I just was noting that they were, in my opinion, necessary sections.
Okay.
For purpose of clarification, which version of this are you at this time referring to and referencing to
It's-
move forward on
it
the
looks
last one?
like
They all
this.
look the same. The last one that Lynn sent? Because Mr. Maynard's comments were 2 or 3 versions prior to that.
And I take objection to some of those.
Do we have your most
My-
recent version in here then? Does it
My
seem like
question
that's
is
your most
mostly to
recent?
eliminate my
Well,
confusion.
mine is the same with the last one except for the changes Brian made. Those are very minor and obviously copies.
Right. So it's, the agenda that we had, the one that we have in the agenda is the one that we're referencing. In the second.
That's a pretty confusing one.
Okay, do you wanna elaborate? You're on this committee, so what the discussion's
Well,
for.
Lynn's version is straightforward and to the point. It's short, it's simple. The comments that were made that this should be, that changes should be made to the subdivision code are wrong. This should not affect the subdivision code in any way, shape, or form. Once you put it in the subdivision code is a how-to ordinance. If you put this into, any of this into the subdivision code, then you can do it as long as you meet these requirements. There's no other review required.
This is Lynn's version, so I don't know what you're saying. Lynn's version was shortened to the point, but
Yes.
then you're saying this. So
Well,
that-
but
we're talking
some
about
of
Lynn's-
Brian's additions talked about putting stuff into the subdivision code.
What,
No.
All I did was highlight the 2 sections that Lynn added to the original draft and thought, that, in my opinion, those were necessary.
What
so
did
that-
those say?
So those are Lynn's comments. They were already in there. All he did was highlight them and say that they had been
Well,
added from my version.
What were those sections that were added?
It's under B, planned dwelling district, layout and design. 3A, any proposal for a planned dwelling district, shall be treated as a new subdivision or re-subdivision of land. And then B, each plat prepared pursuant to these 0 lot line standards shall contain the following notation on the face of the plat. This plat has been approved under the provision of Article XVII of the Chapter 31. So
And is
that's
that
what-
gonna be added to the subdivision code or to the zoning code?
That's chapter.
That language goes into the zoning
So,
code.
that's what I-
Chapter-
That's the way I
Zoning
took
code,
it.
yeah.
but-
31.78 of the zoning code.
Okay, because none of this belongs in the subdivision code.
Well,
The
none of it
subdivision
is.
code is fine.
Yeah,
Yeah, none of it is. It's in the.
I
You
mean,
said-
I
you
had-
said none of this
well-
belongs in the zoning code?
There is a section,
It's section 30.1
yeah.
dash
Well,
6.
In my version, section
Yeah.
1 of the ordinance.
Yeah.
uh,
It changes there's a 30.1-6, and it changes 9 for subdivisions, which are simultaneously being considered under the provisions of that article of chapter 31 of the Centralia City Code for zoning as a planned dwelling district, a physical or written description of the lots, which will be subject to locations of attached one-family dwellings. That's the only thing that's added to the subdivision code. And you think that's unnecessary?
Well, I don't particularly like the language of it because I'm not sure what it says. I'm not sure how it's going to be interpreted. I think there's better ways of writing it if you want to put something like that in there. But normally speaking, these things do not affect the subdivision codes. These are in the zoning codes because the zoning code gives the city more discretion than The subdivision code does.
But that's what this is in, is a zoning code, are we correct?
Majority of it. It
Not
only adds
all
All
that
but
of
one
it.
section is in the zoning code.
Okay,
All but one.
And usually what there is, there's some specific things in there that say, in addition to what is required for a preliminary plat or a final plat, these additional requirements, and that's usually in the zoning code rather than in the subdivision code. Now, if you want to put something in the subdivision code that says things are being simultaneously created, I'm not sure that it's necessary, but it doesn't really hurt anything. I mean, there's a reason to stay away from the subdivision code with these things.
Honestly, I don't see any point where doing anything in the subdivision code.
It's
And
just-
if unfortunately, wording is a problem, you've had the time to review it just like the rest of us.
Well, I mean, in one place it calls for appearance standards. Are we really gonna be concerned about the appearance standards
And
for,
what section is that?
that's in section D of what Lynn, let me see, B3D. Covenants and restrictions shall be submitted prior to a final approval, and it shall include a maintenance agreement, I have no problem with that, and appearance standards. I think that's a little, also on item 1, the second sentence of that is worded a little bit awkwardly. And there's some awkward wording in item E on the last part of what Lynn did.
let me ask you a question, what makes it awkward to you? I guess you gotta help me understand that, what is awkward for you?
Well,
Not getting-
for instance, on B1, it says 0 lot lines shall apply only to side setbacks that serve as common walls between units. That's the first sentence. The second sentence says front, rear, and side yard setbacks shall comply with existing requirements. You just said that the side yard doesn't apply there. What I wrote is other side yard setbacks and front and rear front and rear setbacks shall comply with existing requirements.
So you just think we need to add the word other?
And change the order of it so that it's understood that other side yards, it's not other rear yards. These are side yards. You're not affecting the rear and the front yards.
Right, I think that's why it's just spelling it out, saying that they're going to stay the same.
Right, but it's awkward the way it says it because it says side yard setbacks and you've just exempted one of them, but now you're saying side yard setbacks must comply.
Okay, so we can add that word other right in front of side yard setbacks.
Yes, although I would change the order of it and put other side yard setbacks and then front and rear yards. I think it makes it clearer.
Other takes care of it, I think.
On item C,
Mhm.
I would add 2 words to it. On that same portion, it says the preliminary plat for a 0 lot line development shall show building footprints. I would put the proposed building footprints, you don't have the building in place.
What page you on there?
Well, I'm on his.
So, which section, because I'm not seeing C.
3C, D3, this is what he had.
Just
B3C.
approving that, and then they're gonna build it. Well, that's what you're approving, right? You're proposing to vote.
It's
That's what you're gonna see.
Right.
You
so
hold them
We don't
there.
ever call it a
Oh.
proposed in any other section in the code, I don't believe.
That's why the
Preliminary plat for
you
the
gotta build it wrong, if you don't, you got a problem.
2 words together.
I don't know if we're making it too difficult.
Preliminary plat for receiver shall show approximate building footprints.
Okay.
The proposed building footprints.
All right.
Suggestion, those sections that Dawn thinks are awkwardly worded, just run back Cindy and see if the lawyer thinks they're
Okay, yeah. all right.
straightforward or not.
And if she, she sees any change, it needs to be made in her opinion, then,
When I drafted this, I kind of figured she'd do that anyway.
right, well, I mean,
She did review, so. Any other changes?
For, if I may, just a couple of things, and to me, item 1 merits change because simply from basic grammar, because you've discussed something and then you come back in the next sentence and basically discuss the same thing again with a different net result, so I think that one does merit attention. In item F, under 3, I really do think for a development like that, to have a requirement that includes a maintenance agreement, because I'm wrestling with things like that at the county level right now, I agree with that. I think that for city ordinance to make reference then to, if someone wants to take it far enough, for the city to tell a developer what the appearance standards are, I think that's a pretty gross overreach, because anything going forward, any sort of subdivision is gonna have, some covenants and that sort of thing. In order to have the maintenance agreement, you're gonna have some covenants, which will have building standards and that sort of thing. And as this is written, I mean, if someone wants to interpret it literally the way it's written, the Planning and Zoning Commission or the City Council could say, well, we have purview over the appearance standards and we don't like the way your house looks, so you have to change it. And I doubt that that's what the intent was.
It was not the intent.
But that's.
The intent was that somebody specifies in writing for future purchasers to have a baseline to work with. And the city is not in that at all, except that it has the record that says what that. We don't sign off on covenants generally either, except that we recognize that they've been written.
Right.
And recorded. And therefore become part of a contract for sale of that lot. So the city's not making any judgment on aesthetics.
we're not an
That was
architectural
the
committee or anything
Okay,
like that.
then explain to me, I'm not trying to be difficult, but
No.
I've done enough of this and I've written enough legislation. What is meant by the appearance standards for the owners? What falls under appearance standards?
Because the way this is written, all you have to do is say, we don't like the appearance of what you're doing, and we're not going to approve this.
But the way this is worded, their covenants and restrictions are establishing that maintenance agreement and those appearance standards, which we don't rule on.
You're right,
That's correct.
but it still says
But
that
it
the
still
council
says that.
have purview over the appearance.
I have no problem with the maintenance standards, because that should be in those anyway.
And if I'm being dense,
We're not just putting it
educate
must
me,
meet the-
help me understand what meant.
But the covenants are going to establish an appearance for that
I would
development.
assume so. Then why is it needed, why is it stated here?
But,
It's overreach.
would it be a simple saying it must meet the covenants?
That gets fixed. All right, let's go down this road. The covenants say that the minimum square footage shall be 1,300 square feet, and the roof shall be a 612 pitch, and half of the front shall be a masonry veneer. And those covenants, pretty typical of a lot of places here in town. And it gets submitted to the council during the planning process, and someone looks at it and says, I really don't like the appearance of that. I think they ought to be an 812 pitch and full brick, and because the code says we get to have purview over your appearance standards, if you don't want to build that way, you can't have your permit and your project go forward.
That's what it says, literally.
I don't see the difference between that and the current language and the subdivision reg, and it's, this council has never exercised architectural or appearance concerns over anything.
There's always a
New
first.
subdivision. I mean, if that takes some language to, you need to specify whatever it is, but you don't need to dilly-dally about the minutia of appearance standards. You just
Well,
have to
it's
say,
very,
they will
very
set it
good.
out, it will be part of the documents for approval, and therefore a matter of public record and recorded with the county. I think it's worded that way, but other thing to ask Sydney.
I'll ask her about that.
Some of this language I took from other cities' ordinances also.
Right.
I mean, I strongly object to the word, the appearance standards. If it's stated otherwise and it's made clear that council doesn't get to reject it based upon that, I don't have an objection to it. But if the way this is read, the council could disapprove it because we don't like the appearance of what
Well, I'll tell you
going
this,
to do.
because of some builders are different than other builders, their covenant better be held to the letter of the law that they give to us, because I don't want something looking like a.
The city doesn't enforce covenants.
Well, I understand that, but when it gets down to what we're gonna end up with, as far as the city and what the city looks like, we're not gonna be coming and telling you whether it's gray brick or whatever like that. They've never done that anywhere where I've been, but if that's the case and that's concerned, we're not gonna have overreaching power to be able to decide whether we like that dress or not, you know?
I mean, this
That's what we're
is
not
talking about, you
right?
gotta have a maintenance
That's your
agreement,
concern,
and I
right?
agree, yes.
Am I hearing that right from both of you guys? You're mainly saying it's overreaching because you don't wanna have, we don't wanna have the same, we just don't like the color of that dress, or it's a dress, it's the length it's supposed to be, and it's only showing this much, but we still don't like that color, so we're not gonna let you have that. That's what.
That's
you're-
kind of what it says here
That's
now.
what you're worried about.
We'll double check with Sydney, and if Sydney says that she agrees with what,
I mean, it's
What you're
easy just to
saying.
take those words out, because those things are gonna be in those covenants anyway.
Right.
and if Sydney agrees with what they're saying, is the commission okay with taking that out for the final draft? Because we still have to have a public hearing on this.
All right. Would be for me, I mean.
Okay.
The only statement I'll continue to make is, you clearly just stated that we don't review and approve covenants, but this ties back to the covenants that we don't approve, so what does it really matter if it's in there or not?
Because this says that you will submit and, prior to final approval and include a maintenance agreement and appearance standards.
As
So
part of
apparently the
covenants,
city is going to have some control over it, because if maintenance agreement isn't in there, then the city's probably gonna reject it. And probably should.
So,
Yeah,
I have seen overreach on some of these by planning staff.
I'm okay with what Sydney directs us with on it, as far as that goes. I mean, as far as the template we have, I want it to be in shape when we leave here tonight, if we can, without question, where we can move forward. And if that's one of the cases, I wouldn't have a problem, it's our legal counsel, she feels that it deems it to be conflicting or confusing, and to take it out, I have no problem with that. I mean, does anybody else really?
no, whatever our legal counsel does, it's.
You know, that's kind of what we defer, I mean, so I think we're okay with that, if that makes sense.
I had one other question on item L under that section. It specifies that the side lot line where they're attached between any two. Let me read that again, I may talk myself out of my own question. The side lot line between any two attached one-family dwelling, the side lot line between shall be perpendicular to the front lot line, and shall be straight for its.
That's the one that we want out of there. Or it's just plain wrong.
But it's talking about the, well, let's clarify that.
Okay.
On item L, the language says that the side lot line between any two attached one-family dwellings shall be perpendicular to the front lot line and straight for its entire length. Okay with the straight for its entire length, because you don't want to be probably in the middle of the house. When you drafted that to say the side lot line between any two attached one-family dwellings, did we mean on the common wall or the yard line between two of those structures?
I believe it's the common wall, it would be the
Physical
zero
common
lot
wall.
line.
And see, that's where it's wrong, because if you've ever watched how a builder builds, he goes out there and he marks what he's gonna build, and he digs it out, then he forms it up and he pours it.
Understood.
I can guarantee you that that front wall is not parallel with the street. So the common wall between them isn't going to be perpendicular to the street.
Well, it's close, it's awful close.
This says it will be perpendicular. Now, this is a great for surveyors because it's kind of a full employment act for surveyors, because now the surveyor is going to have to go stake it out, and if it's not perpendicular, then you're either going to run that line as a skew through there, and possibly if it's off far enough, you're going to own some of your neighbor's house, which is not what the intent is. It should not be perpendicular to the road. It should be a straight line that is down the common wall. That's a matter of something that most people wouldn't consider because they're not surveyors. Surveyors actually have to survey these things, and it becomes a problem for us. But it is a full employment act for surveyors if that's what you want.
And my question from a practical standpoint, what if you're on the arc of a cul-de-sac lot and you meet the building setbacks, but for whatever reason, because and it could happen if you had a particularly narrow front along the curvature, that house didn't set at a perfect perpendicular to the arc of the curve, meets the setbacks, but is maybe a little farther from the arc of the curve on one side than on the other. Let's say for whatever reason, just sheer aesthetics, it looked better that way. Then that line, if it's a rectangle shaped lot, it's no big deal. But what if it's on an arc?
Like a
Maybe
pie
overthinking
shape,
it.
like a pie shaped
Right.
lot.
Yeah, if it's on a pie-shaped
We're
lot.
talking about cul-de-sac, basically.
Yeah, but like on a
They're running
pie-shaped
straight down.
cul-de-sac.
Or any curved street for that matter.
Yeah, and it could set, most likely would set square with everything as much as it could set square on a curve. But what if for some reason it's set, well, there's one out there, perfect example, that one on the middle cul-de-sac in Southwest Country where they set it in there and met the setbacks, but they jacked it in there with one side. Sorry, not stomping on any toes, I just thought about that. But you know which one I'm talking about? And it doesn't set on the arc of the curve like the rest of them, so then you couldn't meet that perpendicular requirement. And I don't know that, I'm just saying, what if?
The mathematical solution to that would be to add more language, saying perpendicular to the front yard line, or to a line tangent to a curve at that point.
But builders don't build them that exact.
Why not?
Because it costs too much money.
If you built downtown, all the downtown is zero lot line.
Right.
Do you go and build your building and then say, oh, well, it's only an inch or two off?
But the problem with this is that you're planning this lot after the fact. So you're putting your building on there, and then you're gonna come in and run a line, and it's now, the building wasn't put parallel to the road, so that the common wall line isn't perpendicular. And so now you're off, and it may be only off a few inches, but this says it's going to be perpendicular. And if perpendicular is only one thing. I don't go out there and stake buildings for most contractors. They're not gonna pay me to do that, and that's fine with me, I don't wanna do it.
If you don't do it up front, you're gonna do it on the back end, because you're gonna have to have an exact legal description on what that common wall line is.
That's true, but then that's very easy to do after the fact. Once they've started that foundation and got that foundation in place and put that wall up, I can go survey that, and then I can extend those lines out, and it's not gonna be perpendicular, almost never. Guaranteed.
And if it's not perpendicular, you might run into the problem that you're shortchanging one frontage in favor of another.
That's correct.
So I mean, we're off an inch or so, over 25 feet, you may be off a foot.
Right.
And so unless you have a lot of fair play in those lots to allow for that condition, so you still meet the lot width at the front or the rear, I can see that happening too, then you go back, you do a lot split.
Right, but there's language in here that takes care of that. Because it says, zero lot line lots may be less than the minimum acreage for the zoning district as long as the development does not exceed the maximum density for the zoning district. So you're covered on that portion of it. But what happens if they slide it one side or the other, you still have that problem.
So do we have a? Okay,
I
what we
would
should do
on the
with
arc
this
of the
line,
tangent.
with this,
Yeah, it comes back to what
Section.
you wrestled with a few years ago about setbacks on pie-shaped lots with curved fronts and how you establish that, and from the developer's perspective, looking down the road, because you're gonna come in and do that split after the fact, best intentions aside, best efforts aside, what happens if for some reason, when that is done, the projection of that center line is 2 feet off of truly perpendicular all the way through that lot? So you're not gonna tear the house down.
So now you're gonna
And
refuse
what's
to plat
the
it because it's not
provision
perpendicular.
there, if for some reason, best efforts be darned, it happens. You know, and again, not trying to be difficult, but just asking, because yeah, this is different and new, so we don't wanna create something that bites us in the butt down the road. And I was making up an example until I thought of that one out there that's real life existence that would not meet, it's met every other standard for the building, but it wouldn't meet that standard, and there's really nothing wrong with the way it's situated on the lot. You know, I'm just asking what if.
I remember the time when lot setbacks were defined by percentage of lot width is
Right.
carefully defined, and that led to setbacks of changed dimension too,
Right.
until the city corrected that. So now it's never more than 6 foot required.
Right. But-
Um,
But this will cause a problem at some point. And it won't take very long because builders aren't that exact in putting their buildings on there.
Well, but I can't see it giving builders carte blanche, oh, we're gonna ignore that, as long as the first lot is there, okay, we can put that thing anywhere, and the city's gonna have to go along with it. They have to make a reasonable attempt to go where the common line was intended to go. And then if it's off by a couple of inches or 6 inches, and the surveyor after the fact determines where that line is, then you file a lot split with the city, and gets recorded in the
But-
deed when you sell it.
But the final plat on these is going to be done after the building is up. Now, you're doing the plat of the whole thing, whether it's duplex lots or whatever, but the final plat on that lot to divide it is done after the building is built.
Why?
I don't understand that either.
Because otherwise you have to be, you're gonna have a surveyor stake every one of these buildings, and that builder's gonna have to be dead on. And that is a ridiculous requirement.
I can't see, our ordinances specifically say you can't build in a subdivision until there's a final plat issue.
You will have a final plat, but there will be an additional final plat to split the lot after the fact.
Well, why go through that much? I mean, additional final plat.
Well, I mean, it can be done as a lot split after the fact,
A lot split's fine.
but the final plat is going to be for the duplex lot. And then a lot split would split it into 2 portions, a lot A and a lot B.
You're envisioning a whole bunch of little 0 lot line subdivisions of only
That's the
one
way they're
building.
done, yes. In every other city I've ever seen, or every other county, that's the way it's always done.
So if we're worried about a few degrees, a few inches here or there, why don't we just put the term perceived perpendicular? That way it doesn't say it has to be exactly 90 degrees.
Why don't we just use the projection of the common wall?
That would really be at the discretion of the rest of the members of the board.
Well, because if the common wall is off, because the builder don't know what he's doing, or did a shoddy job of what they were doing,
So are you gonna make him tear the building down, or just,
Well,
you
I
gonna
don't
leave,
know, you
are you
know.
gonna leave a duplex
Adam's
lot in there
objector
that is,
deal
you,
over
you've
there.
got all these other lots in there that are individually, each unit is individually owned, and you're gonna refuse to let them split this one lot, and make it a rental duplex because of the fact that the builder got it off.
Well, if the builder's off 2 foot in my business, that's being off $500,000, and I'd get
Yeah.
fired.
I mean, that's,
We do check the setbacks. They
Yeah,
can't
we
vary
check
from
all
them.
the
That's the whole
setbacks.
purpose of having the setbacks.
Yeah, but you check them before the house is built, how many of them you check afterwards?
How many are we supposed to trust the people to do them? I mean,
I can guarantee you they're not the same.
Oh, I guarantee you, in our subdivision, I've watched them move.
Why don't, to get off of dead center, and hopefully all part friends, let's just leave alone. If it becomes an additional burden on the developer,
I
So
think
be
the key
it.
thing is, the common sense of the local government should be to help a contractor to the extent that we want them to continue to develop and do good work and not penalize them. I mean, if something comes up as a one-off, you kind of work that out, I think, but I would think that you'd go in, and I understand what you're saying, you're gonna get off some, but my God, I can't imagine being off a foot and a half or something like that.
Oh, believe me, I can.
Well, then I'll tell you what, I don't wanna build anything for me.
Well, they may not, but they're out there building.
Well, then maybe they should have to tear something down and eat the cost of something they didn't do right.
No.
If Boyd does a good job of what he does, or Adams, or whoever, then why should we let somebody else that's gonna half-ass something and not go by what they should do?
Because you don't know what builder's gonna come into town and build these.
Well, if they do and they're not right, then it's on their dime.
And so you're gonna make them tear the house down or the apartment down, when adjusting that line a little bit would be fine.
Yeah.
So are we in the opinion we're leaving it alone?
I'm okay with the way it
And
is.
Brian suggested put perceived,
that's what I'd say.
perceived, there we
Put in
go,
perceived,
Yep.
okay.
is that what we're gonna do, can we do perceived? Do you have any other comments on this? Any other issues with it?
I would say that I appreciate the specificity as to the zoning districts in which this style of housing
Agreed.
has been proposed. I think that saves a lot of battles with the community.
Yeah. There's a lot more one. We're ready up, I think, at this point's good. To me, I mean.
So we have some open items on that one to clean up.
Well, can we not make a recommendation based upon Sydney's?
I think we could do that, make a recommendation, and I can email the board back to let you know what her recommendation was. We won't be able to set the public hearing date until after I hear back from her.
Okay.
Now, there's gotta be a public hearing before the planning and zoning on this, right?
Yes,
And then another public hearing before the city, board of aldermen?
yes.
Okay.
But there isn't a minimum requirement between P and Z and the Board of Aldermen. You could have a hearing for P and Z, and then the next Monday or Tuesday have the second public hearing before the board with P and Z's recommendation.
Right.
So it's
So,
not quite as long as.
Right.
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 If we were able to get a recommendation back from Sydney fairly quickly, which I will call her in the morning, we can publish it in the newspaper, we have to publish it in the Guard, so it'll be next Wednesday on 9/11. So the earliest that we'd be able to have this hearing, public hearing, would be September 26th. So that's what we will shoot for, if that's okay with the commission.
Quite honestly, from a selfish perspective, the more expeditious this process could move within the parameters that are prescribed.
I'm all for that. It's good, but stuff's slow to me. I'm getting used to it, tough. So I can appreciate that.
So we would need a motion, to recommend you adopt the changes. Pending Sydney's review.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? We would do that, no?
May I make a query? What was it, your intent with the subdivision out on the other side, 124, that you were gonna go through the preliminary plat, build all the streets, and then build the houses and final plat each lot because it became a attached single-family dwelling already constructed? Or were you going to do it as a whole?
We will bring a plat for the entire development.
That's what I thought, and that doesn't jive with what I was understanding.
But it will be for duplex lots, not for the splits on those lots. We don't wanna put in those lot lines, for the splits until after the, houses are built. Because there may be reasons why it gets moved a little bit one way or another,
Well,
and it may not be exactly half.
well, then it better be big enough, be roughly. I understand the flexibility and this gives it to pick and choose whether you want this to be a duplex or a single-family unit or a duplex with two owners.
Right.
This gives that flexibility, but coming back and having a hearing and the whole McGill after each,
No, I would much prefer to see that done as a lot split. Where it's
and
just,
that's fine.
which I think would, I'm not sure that lot split might need to be changed in the zoning ordinance to allow it, but I'm not sure that it wouldn't be allowed the way it is because it would meet the zoning code, or because this would be part of the zoning code. And that's what a lot split is to allow something that is allowed. Because these splits after the fact are strictly administrative. They really don't require them to come back to P and Z.
Agreed. That's the intent. Somehow, I think I need to go back and just follow the procedure through to be sure that we're not doing something not intended by following what you're suggesting. I want to double check.
But I've never seen it done any other way. I've never seen where you're gonna lay out the lot line, on the final plat, and then you have to adhere to that lot line, and the builder has to get that line right. Because that's asking an awful lot of most builders. They are not that good.
Among other things, most other ones to do it, I think probably on my own, I'll do some phone calls to the cities that are doing this, not just Missouri cities, but some other ones, and ask them how they're procedurally following their ordinances.
I mean, I can tell you that, there's a subdivision in southwest of Columbia, and they did a whole lot of these, and there's a final plat on every single lot after the final plat of the whole subdivision was done. They final platted every single lot with a split. And that's the way it's usually done.
And do they start back from step one with sketch plat and wondering?
No, it's a minor plat, but it goes through as a final plat.
I think I still need.
Which I think is too cumbersome. I think that that's why we should go with a lot split on these after the fact.
So we know where we're at, I mean, is that what you're doing?
Are we-
And you're doing what we just talked about, there we go.
Are we ready to move forward then? Okay. So the next thing on the agenda is rules for chickens in city limits.
Paul,
This
where are they going?
Seriously, this is a very common question,
Yes, when I
so.
think of that, I shall take
I
that.
personally have questions.
Yeah.
Where you going? You don't want all the phone?
No,
Thank you, man.
Well, and it's not just that, it's chickens and fowl. So, you all have some copies from other cities. This question gets asked a lot. So the current ordinance just says, and the way I interpret it, and the way Lynn interprets it, I probably interpret it because that's the way he interpreted it before for many years. But 30,000 square, you have to have at least 30,000 square feet in your lot to have any chickens. If you have 30,000 square feet, you can have 25. Now, some people interpret that if you have 15,000 square feet, you can have 12 and a half chickens. So, we
It's
feel
a,
that we need to.
it's a
I'm gonna have 12 and a half, and I'm gonna have this one's head.
just so you know, I rode with Sam, she'll tell you, on several trips. Sadie got sick of me riding around town, her taking notes and I drove her around, but the chicken Foghorn Leghorn thing came up, and we're not gonna have a rooster, so they got rid of him, but that being said, these people are now dividing if they've got, how many square feet they've got, down to they can have 2 chickens or 2.5 chickens. It's maddening for her, it needs to be really clean, I think, and simple, and
Yeah.
either you got 30,000, we can spend a lot of time on this, but for the simplicity for her, and it must be able to enforce it, I think if you got 30,000 square feet, you can have chickens, if you don't, you can't have a chicken.
Well,
And having-
it's kind of hard, if you don't have a lot that size, it's kind of hard to make the setback requirements for a chicken coop,
Right.
which are a lot more than just.
Well, yeah, I can have a
Oh,
whole
but-
strip, I didn't know that, I think I'm gonna get one.
Well,
But that's
I
not
mean,
what some of them are doing. Some of them are building their chicken coops right up against the fence, which is the property line.
And that's not
So,
legal.
Well, that's
I
beside the
think
point.
it's,
They're
But
doing
they're
it.
I think
eliminate
it's
the
a
problem.
trendy thing. I think it's a trendy thing. People want chickens, they want fresh eggs out of their backyard. So,
An Airbnb might want them, but they gotta have 30,000 square feet. Go and get your own chicken.
You can have Callie out there collecting eggs.
Because at the time zoning
That will not be an issue
regulations
with me.
were put together, we were very much a rural
Oh,
community.
absolutely.
And there were,
You could,
on the periphery of town, there were large lots that were still sort of farmsteads.
well, it's just like the lot I have. At that time, you could have a chicken or a cow still, and that was because we were still an agriculture town that was growing out a little bit, and we still considered an agriculture town completely, you know, so. You can tell it when you read it, that that's what it is. Plus, I can have a horse, because it's a can.
This has been discussed by the city council before.
I'm sure it has.
And we just left it alone and said, no, you can't have chickens.
But it's been so maddening for her, I think we need to make it really simple and clean, I think.
it does, it does.
Evidently, they don't go by the ordinance, and because there's chickens all over town.
There
Oh,
are.
there are.
It
Yeah.
does, yeah.
And there's
It's-
even signs to sell those eggs.
Yeah.
Well, they won't have the eggs, because they won't have the chickens.
So you have several different options. Also, back to my conversation with Dale Hughes earlier, who's also on the commission. He said he liked the city of Mountain Groves. So it says you cannot, it's the very last, next to the last one. Because you have to have 5 acres to have any chickens. So that's the one he liked. I like the city of Higginsville, and Sandy seemed to, she agreed with me. Higginsville allows, no matter what size your lot is, you can have 6 chickens. You cannot have any roosters. If you own 3 lots, but they're under common ownership, you can still only have 6 chickens. You can't have 18 chickens.
It's not a ratio.
Right, no. So if your house sits on 3 lots, 6 chickens is your limit. So it sets very clear, it sets it. So it really depends on what the commission wants to do. I think we're gonna be torn on this.
My thought is 30,000 square feet, you can have 6 chickens, otherwise you can't have any. Or we do the 5 acre thing and nobody will have a chicken in Centralia.
Andrew Stanton
Not
can move
even
this
me.
to town.
Huh?
Andrew Stanton can move this to town.
Don't bother him right now. He'll be, yeah.
Well, that's why he brings cattle over on that lot.
Yeah.
Yeah, but he hasn't had cattle in there in a long time.
You take it a while, like 3 years probably.
I like John Angel's comment the best. He says if they want chickens, they can move out to the country.
I mean, so I don't.
He was on the board the last time we discussed this.
Looks like to me, we'll end up with people who get out, it's like people would get a puppy, or they get, puppy's probably the worst thing you can get, you're not gonna be responsible to take care of it. Next thing you know, you got pens and everything else that look like heck, you know, and then we're gonna have chicken coops, and they've got tarred chickens, and chickens that became free-range chickens are on my roof. I'm not like that. I'm having fried chicken.
One thing that Sandy wanted to mention too, if we do pass something to allow chickens, not as restrictive, then we also need to adopt something that talks about not letting them run at large.
Well, we have to
Yeah.
control it.
I'm just kidding.
You gonna license
Government control chickens?
You gonna have to license them?
This is, I've seen this.
No licenses, no
She
leashes,
was
just they
chased by a
can't run
chicken.
anywhere.
So,
But
okay,
can you use a harness as long as it's not a choke collar?
Yes.
Right.
license
So
on
you
the
can
truck
have-
now.
Street.
It's not attached
so
to
you can have
chicken
more
and
chickens than you can dogs and cats.
Yeah.
Yes. Right now, we only allow 4 dogs and cats, or combination thereof.
Oh, I
to be
thought
licensed.
it was, 4.
There are plenty of people that have more than 4, we're quite sure they're just not licensed, and we haven't caught them. So, you're only supposed to have 4.
I make a motion that we clarify the 30,000 square foot lot as it exists today, that means you can have 6 chickens, and if you don't have 30,000 square foot, you can't have any chickens at all.
That's what we need.
I would say,
I would second that, yeah.
I would say no chickens at all.
I would second that.
Well, if you annex something and grandfather existing chicken coops in, you need to.
How many lots in town are 30,000, whatever, square feet?
There's a lot.
Not very many, but there are some.
Does that include the house being taken out of that 30,000
No.
square?
That's
a
there's
lot.
really not that many,
It's
it's
a lot
30,000
itself.
square feet.
Yeah.
I mean, you go down Gallon Chances, there's several of them.
You cannot have any,
What sense is not be passed? I couldn't have, they have a horse, price
you
tag.
can probably have it placed.
We needed James here tonight
Oh my goodness.
to make sure this is in the paper, so when Sandy goes out sending notices, that
Okay.
people don't start going to hurry.
I'll bring it up today, Dawn.
So, okay, so we just want to
I'll make
change
it
the
brown.
existing ordinance to say you can have 6 chickens if you have 30,000 square feet. If you have less than 30,000 square feet, you can have 0 chickens. That's what the definition says.
No, they're not saying that.
The what?
How can I monitor that?
Do you want to have any rules or regulations
You're
about them
gonna have
not
to
running at
license
large?
chickens?
No, I don't think. that-
No license, I don't think anybody.
I mean, the Higgins,
What if they die?
the Higginsville one calls about keeping them in an
Yeah.
enclosure and fenced in at all
Right.
times.
Yeah.
I like the Higginsville one, just add the 30,000 square feet
Okay,
to the equation with the setback.
Are you making that motion?
Well, you already made much.
Oh, yeah, we have, you'll vote it out, but we need to add that, so.
Now, remember, chickens are dangerous because a woman in Australia just died because a chicken pecked her varicose vein and she bled to death.
Clickbait.
The good Lord called her, it's her time.
so
That's a.
we're just gonna look at modifying
Then Higginsville, we're gonna modify the Higginsville to include enclosures and
30,000 square feet.
30,000.
So
Or
enclosure,
to include 30,000 square feet, it has enclosures.
Yeah.
so,
What kind of
a
enclosures?
fenced in backyard, how you gonna know if they got less than 6 chickens in the backyard?
Their
Sandy
neighbors
gonna
will.
climb over the fence and look over?
Well, it's the same thing with junk cars. The neighbors wheel on them or.
Tethering
Being
won't
open
be a
and
problem,
you
will it?
watch.
I would just get rid of chickens.
Cannot tether your chickens.
Listen,
Yeah,
we need
what-
to
We
anti-tether.
need to put in there
No,
that
we
chickens
need-
cannot be tethered, that's not considered having on their tongue.
Okay.
But we don't know that.
I will draft this.
Get it together.
Since the original limit is in the zoning code, and this is in the chapter on animal and fowl, you still have to amend the zoning code if you're going to have.
If you're gonna allow 6 chickens instead of 25.
Right.
Yes.
So you.
The code says 25 chickens?
Yeah.
I can have 25 chickens, but I'll tell you right now, Andrew's gonna still contract with me.
Then, 0.
All right. So, I'll get a draft out and then we will go from there. We'll have to have a public hearing.
That's a great idea.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah, and after James puts it in the paper, you're gonna have all them chicken lovers here.
That's what it's done. That's what it's for. It's for public comment.
Oh, I'm gonna be here, you can be sure.
I need a goat listed as well.
If you
I hope
recall,
one of them has a chicken for an emotional support animal.
if you recall, some of the biggest attendances at public hearings was when we had pit bull ordinances.
Yeah.
Unbelievable.
So animals were.
Oh, it's a big
Well,
deal.
the
I
anti-tethering
don't know, this feral
brought the
cat
biggest,
brought quite a few of them in here.
Oh, man.
feral cats, well, the anti-tethering brought a lot of people.
Yeah, well,
Okay. I have my marching order.
Now, you mentioned something about horses and something too. Now, where
It's
does
in
that,
the- It's in the same code, it's in the same section.
He's referencing that back in the day when it was 30,000.
right, no, I read the whole thing,
Yeah.
but, I mean, it mentioned horses, but now we haven't talked about horses, so,
We're gonna leave horses alone until we get a lot of calls about horses.
So I'll put
okay,
one in
I'm
my
just
backyard,
asking.
and they'll-
John may wanna put a cow in his backyard, you know.
So,
I'm getting.
so if you
Well-
have half the area, you can put half a cow in there?
Half the cow, half the horse,
Miniature horse.
miniature horse.
There you go.
Horse is a horse.
All right, so,
Little horse.
so we have our recommendation for changes right now.
I will probably set it up for the same as the other public hearing is.
26.
The 26th.
She'll be in the paper at the same time as
Yeah.
the plans for next week?
Yeah,
Okay,
that's the plan.
okay.
So we're finished with chickens.
Yeah.
Brings us to number 6.
That's Maris.
I will add, as may arise, in relationship to the Airbnbs and all that, I had a call, the voice message, and talked to the Gibblers and her mother. We're excited, thought it was a great thing. Just want to let them know that we're hearing, they knew it was gonna go on about it or something, and that they just want to know that we were supporting it. I explained to them where we were kind of at with it, and they said that they'd be, just to make sure that everybody knew that they thought, a lot of people thought like they did. But anyway, they were really in favor of us looking how we work with that as a city to be able to utilize those services potentially in our area.
Does our ordinance really say you gotta have 3 acres for a bed and breakfast? That's a ridiculous
I'm
requirement.
sure it was, Lynn said it was set up because of the Chance guest house. I'm gonna get a copy.
We allow bed and breakfasts in R3 and up, with a limit of, I think, 5 rooms. Have to look it up. Chance Company had the guest house that was a special case in every dimension you could think of.
Sure.
And when the company divested themselves of that building and went back up to the Chance here, they were thinking in terms of wedding venues and all sorts of stuff. And so the ordinance recognized that that was a special building, and they were going to allow for B&B. And there were rooms for 9 potential bedrooms. Nothing ever happened because it was never requested as a conditional use for that.
Gotcha.
You're allowed, like I say, B&Bs in R3. The problem is that
If we're
the
gonna,
house she was looking at is R2,
understood,
and within my tenure as administrator, we tried to zone that block, rezone it R3, so somebody could develop apartment buildings in the middle, that donut hole in that block. And nobody else who was a property owner on that block wanted any part of that. They wanted it to stay residential character with small, small families.
so we may have to, I guess we'll have to look at potentially telling me that an Airbnb treated differently as a one-off.
No, we're not, they're not defined in the code.
No, understood, gotcha.
And the other thing that Sydney talked about was temporary vacation residences.
Yeah.
Those are not defined in our code either. The quintessential would be to rezone it R3 and then she could apply for it.
Yeah, but then you got everybody coming in and complaining about that again.
That's right.
Probably not complaining about what's going there, but what potentially could go into the rest of it.
The fact that it would be R3, yes.
So therein lies the problem. The donut hole that they didn't want to have filled with potentially a bunch of housing that people aren't taking care of things potentially a year, 2, 3, 4 down, so it does impact value of homes around you, that kind of thing. This is completely different because you're talking about, people aren't gonna go stay at a dump. And, you know, as they travel across the nation, so I mean, these houses are gonna be typically Victorian style house, a house like that that's two-story, you know, so. So, yeah, I know what you're saying, but I think it's really different.
Well, my question would be, what prevents her from using it as an Airbnb now? That's a rental. Houses are rental all the time. Is there something in our ordinance that prevents short-term rentals?
There's a rental with one renter, probably not.
Is that what you-
It's under the city.
I mean, yeah, you're just renting it for a weekend or a week or.
Couple of
But
months.
most of those Airbnbs are single, that's just one person renting it. It's not,
I can see in the future, people would come here for chance, things like that. They stay in Columbia, but if they could stay here in a neat house that somebody has that's fixed up, it's gonna have to have some attraction to it, or people aren't gonna stay there, but that would be an interesting house, how you theme it inside, that kind of thing. I could see us getting, you know, some people, a few people staying in town that are staying here potentially.
I don't know what you referred to, a feasibility study done by Lori. I'm not quite sure what her parameters were. My experience has been that the guest house and the house across the street,
Apartments.
the apartments, were the only things in town that have ever come close to being bread and breakfast. Anything else is under the table because it's not anything recognized by the city,
So-
unless it's changed in the last 5 years.
So I think the primary concern was that we wanted to make sure that it was on the up and up because of how small the community is. You know, we didn't want to cause a ruckus for you all, with someone coming up here and saying there's 7 chickens instead of 6 in the back.
Right.
And plus, I mean, it gives you guys the opportunity. And what I gleaned from the conversation is that there's maybe nothing in the ordinances, but I think that some ordinances like the city of Jefferson or Herman or something like that provide some avenue for that in the future. Because I mean, like, as a member of the community, I don't want, you know, the city to lower its standards or have a bunch of people kind of coming in transient.
Right.
I mean, it's my understanding that Columbia had no restrictions on Airbnbs until fairly recently, and I'm not sure if they enacted something, but I know they were talking about it. But, you know, if it's just strictly renting a house out for a weekend, or, that's no different than renting it out for a year.
There'll be birds here next and scooters.
Now, part of Columbia's concern was people circumventing the lodging tax.
That's my point.
Right.
That's what I
Yes.
said. They wanted their money, that's why
Right.
they wanted their money, they were
That's
missing
right.
out on revenue.
That's right.
Because there's a lot of it going on there. So,
Okay.
This is a topic that I've followed in the papers, and personal recommendation is that even Airbnb probably should have either an owner occupant or a resident manager for a town like ours. And the biggest rap on Airbnb are that there's nobody there to take responsibility. There's an article in today's Wall Street Journal, and I could probably bring it in and Heather could copy it and make it available to everybody. But it's a much larger city where there is a thriving Airbnb presence, and the owners are not residents, and they rent them out to wedding parties and,
it'll go crazy. My question is, you say resident, or you mean a resident that lives in the home or a resident of the community?
resident that lives in the home.
Have you ever been to an Airbnb? I'm just asking. Have you ever stayed in an Airbnb?
No.
So do you understand the preface of how an Airbnb works? And I'm just asking, like, just trying to.
Yes, I do.
So I'm confused about if you rented a home, like I have family that comes into town from North Carolina, they would rent this home, but instead they're staying in Columbia, eating breakfast in Columbia. I wouldn't want to stay in somebody's house if I'm there. I mean, like, you don't even, it's not the same thing as a bed and breakfast. You're not catering to these people. So So, I mean, like, I don't think, and I apologize if this comes out harsh, I don't think you know enough about Airbnbs or how it works to be able to speak about that, because that's not correct.
I think I do, but this is a matter of personal opinion and the experience of other cities, where
Well,
when there's nobody there to complain to and get corrective action except the city,
you live
the
in.
city doesn't have, if somebody,
That's okay.
the bad example may not occur very often. Probably the type of people doing it here probably aren't gonna have that sort of problem, but when they start throwing beer bottles in the neighbor's yard, playing loud music, and it becomes a party site or reputation for a party site, who do you go to?
That's a very good point. Also, I would like to bring up, because I have stayed in, that's how I do it, I stay at Airbnbs or VDR, the vacation rentals, because I usually go with a group of friends. And you bring up a very valid point, you're absolutely right. Any place I have stayed, there's rules and regulations. And I do know that any place I've stayed, it's never been owner occupied. It's always been the houses to myself. Now, I've had an issue, well, we leave, they come, they fix it. Believe you me, I would monitor it. If something was going on, I wouldn't take care of the situation. I'd call the city of Centralia Police Department and have them go take care of it so that it would be handled in a correct way. That house is a very historical house. I see it as one way and one way only. I could buy that house and I could rent it if that's what I wanted to do. I chose not to go that route because that house has such history. The people that are living there now have spent a lot of time and effort and made that home a beautiful place that is so perfect for a bed and breakfast or an Airbnb. That's the only way I envision that. I don't want somebody going into something that I own, whether it's an Airbnb or one of my rentals, and tearing it up, because that costs me money. And I'm not in a position where I'm going to be throwing money away that I don't have to throw away.
Understood.
Most of the information that you all have is, there's one from Herman about B&B, but then the one from the city of Blackjack is about short-term rentals, and that's essentially what this is, it's a short-term rental.
Short-term.
And according to Sydney, it's not allowed right now in our code, so that's what we would have to look at doing is short-term rentals. At the same time, we might also look at revising our conditional use for bed and breakfast, so that it's not.
Well, and I would have to think that any place I've been, or I have a large deposit I want back.
Right, exactly.
I have a large deposit, I want it back. So I have some guy who's drinking too much hooch over here, I'm gonna straighten him out pretty quick, cause I want knocking a hole in the door, because I don't wanna have to pay for it, I want my deposit back. So that's part of it too, I mean, and how you manage those places, because, you know, I got a $400 deposit, you know, everywhere I go, in a lot of places, so, it can be as much as the night or two you stay, I mean, but, so anyway, I mean, there's a lot of things to talk about, we wanna do it right, if we do something different, and,
But Heather, you said that it's not, short-term rentals aren't addressed in our ordinance?
Sydney interprets it that they're not allowed, and no, they're not addressed, but they're not. She
Well, if
said-
they're not addressed, then I don't see that there's anything that keeps you from doing it.
That's her opinion is that it's not allowed.
I think the
That's our
court
legal
will
counsel's
rule you
opinion.
that. Question, if we do move in the direction of Airbnbs and vacation rentals, are we gonna allow it in every zone?
I mean, if we allow a
Or-
B&B by conditional use in R1 and R2, that would be my suggestion, was to allow it by conditional use.
we just open it up, huh? Be one of those conditional use.
Conditional use in
Yeah.
R1 and R2.
I want to be real careful about opening it up to where, you have a residential area where you get one bad egg in there, it really is a, you know, we have houses today we're gonna have to get abatements against and lawsuits against to get rid of the cats and the, you know, it's a,
I
you know.
recognize that certain landlords will be extra careful.
Sure.
Other landlords will not be. We had some,
Oh, yeah.
We still have some, it looks like to me,
well,
but, well, they don't either.
we're on television, I won't mention names, but certain people who have, foreign money
Oh, yeah.
buy up a lot of,
Oh,
and then put nothing into,
oh, yeah.
maintenance, and the city got lots of complaints about black mold and you name it, and it was an enforcement nightmare.
Sure.
And in some cases, we had no ability to enforce. So, that's the other side of it. It's a matter of the quality of the management, and you can't legislate that.
And I think, well, I think it's a clientele of people in the state too, who you're gonna draw. You're gonna draw people that are travelers, people, I mean, it's, I think it'll be a little different thing, but we can discuss this further. I mean, but I think we're down the road of what she's gonna do and look at.
Yeah.
We can kind of go from there. I mean, it's,
But she has kind of a time-sensitive issue.
Yeah, I would be of the opinion that it would consider a conditional use in R1 or
Yeah.
R2, that would be
Okay.
brought to the board for approval.
And then,
And
you
then we
know,
revise the 3 acre.
okay, and the
You
3 acre, revise it to what? Just take it out?
I mean, honestly, because most lots are what, quarter of an acre.
Not even that.
No.
But that section has some other things like banquet hall and wedding receptions and stuff like that that's a little bit more expensive. You might want a separate category
Separate.
for
Right.
small, whether you want to
I
make
agree.
it 3 units or 4 or 5,
yes.
and specifically add then some language.
3 or
that
less,
does
I'm saying.
Airbnb.
3 or less.
This one has 4 or less, 4 bedrooms or smaller.
Yeah, I'm okay with that. I think that's a good point. I think it's right on
You
the
could just do
That
subcategory,
building-
like 6A or something.
That's what
How,
we're
how
doing.
how many units did you think were gonna fit in?
How many units?
How many
One,
bedrooms?
two.
How many bedrooms?
How many bedrooms?
It's a 3-bedroom. I will post it as, it'll be, the website as will, sleep, 4 to 6.
Uh-huh. And so you're renting to one group that's gonna come in, that's a group of 4 to 6
Yes,
for
I'm not in,
10.
I'm
A lot of times
not
it's just
renting
10
a
people.
room out by room out by room out, no.
No.
It's
Somebody's gonna rent it, and they're
Right,
gonna take the whole thing, it's 6 of them and 6.
So
Yeah.
business people from Chains Company rent the whole thing for,
Yeah, even if it's one person,
Yeah.
they have access to the whole house, but they're only gonna probably sleep in one room, they can sleep in all 3 if they want, but typically
They
they
will
will
just
sleep
Yeah.
in rooms.
I didn't sleep real good in this room, I'm gonna try this one in here.
This one is too hard, this one is too
Yeah,
soft.
yeah.
I think you're on.
So
I look at it in
that's,
Airbnb.
that's what I'm
We'll see
looking
if
at, the
it's
goal
a
I'm
hotel
looking
thing.
at.
You
Right,
can get
right.
the Airbnb now,
Right.
you can always amend it later.
Right.
That would be,
So let's.
The idea is to have Cindy draft change in the zoning ordinance, maybe quick enough to have a public hearing on it at the same time as chickens, no, I want to get chickens.
Chickens
And,
and 0 lot lines and chickens at Airbnbs.
Airbnb's on the 26th.
I might put the Airbnb first and then the lot lines and chickens or vice versa. but-
Understanding, but we just have things we've gotta do, we gotta do it the right way, and it takes time.
And that's why I did the process that I did,
Understood.
instead of just moving
Understood.
forward and buying a house and doing as I pleased with it, which I would have gotten away with it for a very long time before somebody said something.
You're right, Betty, you're right.
I mean,
Well,
I lived here for a very long
No,
time.
understood.
This is my home,
Sure.
and I take great pride in Centralia, and I want to follow the rules to the best of my ability. That's the goal.
I think this is a good conversation to have because I think it's something that's gonna open it up and people see that you're doing it, and they're gonna be like, oh, that's a great idea. You know, I wanna do the same thing. I think
Well,
it-
see,
it-
yeah,
it would be
you know,
very
for
good
Acrefest, we could put a band up in there for one night
Sure.
or whatever, you
Well,
know?
maybe somebody, you know, one of these houses along towards the, coming up here, it's an old historical house, somebody can work on, doesn't live there anymore.
Well, and the fact that it
Encourage
is,
somebody to go ahead and finish it, and finish it nicely.
the fact that it is a historical house and we're working on trying to get a downtown historical district set up, I mean, it all ties together, so I
Yes.
think it's a good thing.
Yes.
And James Rollins was the one who deeded that land to the head,
Wow.
family
Yeah.
years ago.
So there's a history there.
Very, yeah.
Sure, absolutely.
Founded the university, so
Yeah, that's good,
very cool.
very nice.
I make a motion to adjourn.
second.